If a disabled boy, his legs locked in metal braces, stood trembling in the middle of a fine dining room and looked up at you to ask, "Would you dance with me, ma'am?" What would you do? Would you ignore him? Stop him for fear of what others might think? Or would you be the first to take his hand? In a place where reputation and status define a person's worth, a black waitress, someone who had learned to stay quiet, keep her head down, and endure, did what no one else dared to do. She stepped into the heavy silence. She removed her apron, and she reached for his hand. No one knew that what seemed like a simple, quiet moment would unlock a journey no one could have imagined. A boy who once couldn't take a step began to lead. A father who held the whole world in his grasp was forced to learn how to let go. And a woman, once treated as invisible, quietly shifted an entire system through trust, patience, and one dance. If you've ever believed that only the powerful can change the world, this story may make you think again. Listen closely, because this isn't just a story of healing. It's a reminder that kindness, when given at the right moment, it can be a revolution. The Alabaster Room, perched atop San Francisco's Nob Hill, was where power never had to raise its voice. Every movement was subtle, measured, and precisely executed. But that evening, the entire room seemed to freeze. 10-year-old Eli Whitmore, his legs braced in metal supports, stood trembling in the aisle between white linen tables. He looked up at the black waitress, Naomi Ellis, just as she finished pouring a glass of water. A soft waltz drifted from the grand piano in the corner. "Would you dance with me, ma'am?" Eli asked. The room fell silent. Utensils stopped midair. Every eye turned toward the boy, stunned. Conrad Bishopwu, the restaurant manager, rushed over, voice tight as a wire. "Mr. Whitmore, please control your son. This is not a playground." At the far corner table, Gabriel Whitmore, tech billionaire and Eli's father, sat frozen. He had built the Whitmore Dynamics empire on reason and absolute control. Public embarrassment was something he never tolerated. "Eli, sit down." His voice was low, but laced with command. Naomi didn't move. Her gaze shifted from the manager to the billionaire and back to the boy still holding out his hand. Quietly, she untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the tray. "You asked properly," she said. "I can't dance while I'm in uniform." And then, she took his small hand in hers. The next morning, the main lobby of Whitmore Tech, headquarters in the heart of San Francisco's financial district, sparkled as sunlight poured through soaring glass walls. Among a sea of confident, sharply dressed professionals, Naomi Ellis felt like she had stepped into another world. She wore a simple navy blue dress, crisp white blouse buttoned to the collar, and clutched a worn leather bag close to her side. "Naomi Ellis, I have an appointment with Mr. Whitmore." The receptionist gave her a quick, cautious glance before picking up the phone. "18th floor. Ms. Evelyn will meet you there." The elevator opened in silence. Inside, Naomi took a deep breath. Gabriel reached for a file on his desk. Inside were old photos, a brightly painted room, children dancing, a hand-painted sign that read Rise and Rhythm Collective. "You founded this center," he said. "Dance-based rehabilitation for children with disabilities. About to shut down due to lack of funding." Naomi remained calm. "Yes, but I'm not here to ask for a donation. You invited me." Gabriel gave a subtle nod. "I want to hire you to work with Eli. Not as a therapist. As someone who can do what you did last night." "You mean be his personal dance partner?" Not out of fear, but because she'd faced far harder things than this. Ms. Evelyn Sharp, a sharp-featured woman in her mid-50s, posture straight as a ruler, led Naomi down a glass-paneled hallway, cold light reflecting off every surface. Normally, after something like last night, staff are dismissed immediately, Evelyn said, her tone clipped, irritation barely concealed. Especially when powerful guests file complaints. Naomi gave a small smile. I'm not here to keep my job. The door opened. Gabriel Whitmore stood with his back to the room, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city below as if it belonged to him. Ms. Ellis, he said, his voice low and measured, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was the kind of silence people like him used to make others uncomfortable, to get them talking too much, to expose weakness. What's your educational background? He asked, like a challenge tossed across the room. Naomi raised her head, steady and composed. Bachelor's in Child Development from UC Berkeley. Started a master's in special education but didn't finish. No. I want you to be his therapeutic companion. You made him smile for the first time in 2 years. That's not therapy, that's something else. Naomi met his gaze directly. It's called respect. I let him lead. I simply followed. She stood quietly. Didn't take the file. Didn't ask about salary. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Whitmore. But I can't accept the job. Gabriel frowned, visibly unsettled for the first time. Why? Don't you want to take some time to think it over? Naomi looked at him, her gaze steady, not angry, just rooted in a certainty forged over many years. I don't work for people who see my skin color and status before they see my ability. And I especially don't work for those who think healing can be bought with money. The air in the room tightened. Before Gabriel could respond, Naomi reached into her bag and placed a small card on the table. Our Rise and Rhythm Center holds classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. The first session is free if Eli wants to come. She turned to leave. The door clicked shut behind her like a quiet, final period. That afternoon, in a small studio in East Oakland, Naomi returned to scuffed wooden floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and music playing through a portable speaker. Her younger sister, Jade Ellis, was outside taping up the hand-painted sign. So, Jade asked, half teasing, half worried, what happened in the glass tower? He offered me a job as Eli's therapy companion, 5 times my current salary. Jade's eyes widened. And you turned it down? Naomi simply nodded and opened the windows to let the breeze in. Something Gabriel hadn't realized yet. She wasn't just the woman who danced with his son last night. She was a woman on a mission, and his carefully controlled universe, filled with glass towers, balance sheets, and power dinners, was about to meet its most unpredictable challenge. A dance of freedom. Unbuyable. Only livable. Inside the Rise and Rhythm studio, the atmosphere couldn't be more different from the world of contracts and stock options. There were worn wooden floors, soft daylight spilling through old windows, and gentle sounds, the roll of wheels, the clap of small hands, and instrumental music from a Bluetooth speaker covered in stickers. Gabriel Whitmore stepped inside as if trespassing on sacred ground. The man who once oversaw billion-dollar tech projects now stood in a room full of disabled children. No one bowed. No one flinched at his presence. It's chaotic, he mumbled, hands in his pockets, clearly unsettled. Naomi, kneeling beside a little girl adjusting her leg supports, replied without turning, It has structure, just not the kind you're used to. Eli didn't care what his father thought. He had already joined a circle in the center of the room where 4 children were moving together. No one led, no one followed. Every movement was about listening, responding, and adapting. Naomi didn't reach for Eli's hand. She let him find the rhythm on his own. From the back, Jade handed Gabriel a folding chair. The first day's always the hardest, she said gently. For the kids? He asked. A little later, Jade walked in with a strange look on her face. Naomi, there's a Bentley parked outside. Naomi raised an eyebrow. A Bentley! Out here? And you won't believe who's sitting in it. They looked out together. The sleek black car sat by the curb, completely out of place in the modest neighborhood. In the back seat, Eli stared through the window, his face just visible behind the glass, his eyes fixed on the studio inside. The driver's seat was occupied. Gabriel Whitmore sat at the wheel, hands gripping it tightly, gaze locked forward, his body still, as if caught between two worlds, the power he understood and something he'd never dared to face. He's not coming in, Jade whispered. Men like him don't step into places like this. Naomi didn't look away from Eli. Never underestimate the will of a child who wants to lead their own way. They stood still, holding their breath. Then, the car door opened. Eli stepped out first, carefully adjusting his leg braces. He looked around, unsure if he was truly allowed to enter, and then something no one expected happened. Gabriel Whitmore also stepped out. No suit, no tie. He wore a crew-neck sweater and khakis, an awkward attempt to look casual, yet still carried the air of a man used to being served, not stepping down. Jade reached for Naomi's hand and let out a breath. "What did you do?" she whispered. Naomi didn't answer, but in her eyes was a quiet light. Not victory, but hope. Jade smiled. "No, for the parents." Just then, the studio door opened and an elderly woman walked in, leaning on a cane. Her gray hair was braided into elegant coils, and she wore a linen coat, pearl chain glasses, and an air of refined grace. Naomi immediately approached her. "Dr. Vega," she said. "Thank you for coming." Gabriel turned, startled. "You're—" Dr. Rosario Vega nodded, her eyes calm but sharp as a scalpel. "Professor Emerita, Department of Neurology, Stanford. And the woman who submitted 3 grant proposals to your foundation, all denied." Gabriel flushed. "Honestly, I didn't expect to see you here. And I never expected you to understand a place like this in just one visit," she replied. "I oversee the research program here. We're studying the effects of non-directed movement on neural structure and motor network reorganization in children with disabilities." Gabriel looked around. At tentative steps, soft laughter and assistive devices turned into playful instruments. "I thought this was just a community dance class." Naomi had returned by then. She answered calmly, "This is a rehabilitation model built on agency. Here, the kids aren't taught how to move correctly. They're listened to so they can find their own rhythm." Gabriel swallowed hard. He had invested in AI technologies for motor rehabilitation. But what he saw before him wasn't algorithms. It wasn't protocol. It was something he'd never studied. Letting go of control. Eli had now fully joined the group. No one is holding him up. No cheers. Just quiet, knowing glances. And a rhythm. Leaderless, followerless. Free, but deeply connected. And Gabriel, the man always ahead of his time, for the first time felt left behind. An hour passed in the studio like time didn't exist. Eli adapted quickly. He no longer flinched when the other kids gently touched his shoulder to sync a move. No instructor, no choreographed routine. Just music, and bodies are relearning how to trust themselves. Gabriel remained seated. For the first time, he wasn't checking his watch. He didn't care about emails, calls, or earnings reports. He just watched. Suddenly, the music stopped. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the center of the floor. Eli stood alone, fists gently clenched, breathing fast. One leg brace was off. He was trying to balance on just one side. "Eli!" Gabriel shot halfway up from his chair, ready to intervene. But Naomi raised a hand to stop him. "Wait," she whispered. "Let him try." The room held its breath. Eli inhaled deeply. His eyes weren't on anyone, just the floor beneath his feet. Then he lifted his foot. One step, slow, shaky. But his step. A hush fell like the silence after broken music. Then, suddenly, applause, but not from adults, from the other children around him. Small, genuine cheers. No one told them to clap. Eli smiled. Shy, but glowing. In his eyes was a light Gabriel hadn't seen in 2 years. Gabriel stepped back. His chest swelled with emotions he couldn't name. Not pride in his son's achievement, but awe. Because the boy had just done something no one dared force, and no one expected. "Now you understand why we exist," Naomi said softly beside him. Gabriel nodded, barely finding his voice. "What do you call that?" Naomi looked at Eli, now surrounded by his peers, hands gently reaching to honor what he had done. "That wasn't a perfect step, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "It was his first step, in his way." Gabriel said nothing, but the moisture in his eyes, public, unhidden for the first time in years, spoke louder than words. Before the session could end, the studio door opened again. 3 journalists and a photographer stepped inside, cameras and mics already recording. De Rosario Vega nodded in greeting, then held up a freshly printed newspaper. Autonomous Movement Therapy Shocks Neurology World. Early results from Rise and Rhythm surpass expectations. Gabriel instantly straightened, eyes sharp. "You invited the press?" he asked, voice low but cool. Naomi stepped forward, unflinching. "We published our research results this morning. Yes, we invited the media. They have a right to witness the truth." "You used my son for publicity?" Naomi didn't flinch at the accusation. "Eli chose to dance that night. I only followed his lead." A reporter stepped closer, mic in hand. "Mr. Whitmore, just to confirm, the Whitmore Foundation denied funding to this program 3 times. So today, are you here as a father or as a CEO?" The room tightened. Every child in the studio, including Eli, looked up at Gabriel. It was a strange moment. He couldn't hide behind power. He couldn't control the narrative. He had to choose, right here, right now, in front of the cameras. Gabriel swallowed hard, then turned to look at his son. But Eli wasn't watching the adults. He was helping another child find balance on a pair of crutches. His eyes were focused, not for attention, not for praise, but for the person in front of him. Gabriel took a deep breath, then turned back toward the press. "The Whitmore Foundation commits to fully funding Rise and Rhythm for the next 5 years," he said. "We will also build a permanent rehabilitation center modeled exactly after this program, scaled to serve hundreds of children each year." A quiet wave of awe rippled through the room. Camera shutters clicked. Children clapped. From behind Naomi, Jade whispered, "Unbelievable." Gabriel raised a hand, signaling he wasn't done. "With one condition." The room froze. "Ms. Naomi Ellis will retain full operational and academic control. No corporate oversight. No PR influence. No commercial restructuring." Naomi took a small step back, stunned. But before she could respond, Dr. Vega answered for her. "Accepted. On my professional honor." Gabriel nodded lightly. "And this time, I won't leave the meeting halfway." A reporter spoke up. "You completely changed your stance in just a few hours. What's the real reason?" Gabriel looked at Naomi, then at his son. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "what changes a person isn't logic or a scientific report. It's the look in a child's eyes. When they know, for the first time, they're the ones leading the way." 3 months later. The empty lot in West Oakland was now alive with the sound of excavators, hammering, and colorful blueprints pinned along a temporary fence. This was the construction site of the Rise and Rhythm Rehabilitation Center, funded by the Whitmore Foundation. But there were no company logos, no signs bearing Gabriel's name. Because, true to the agreement, this wasn't a branded project. It was the work of children once labeled as limited. Naomi visited the site every week, not to supervise progress, but to speak with families, consult with architects about every detail, from handrail height to the slope of the studio floor. Here, every brick reflected real, lived experience. Eli visited often, too, and every time he brought a new friend, children just starting the journey he once walked alone. Gabriel came as well. He didn't say much, didn't interfere, but always stood just outside the frame, watching, taking notes, learning. "Who's the new kid today?" Naomi asked Eli one afternoon. "His name's Harper. He used to do physical therapy at a hospital, but he said it felt more like a test than healing." Naomi smiled. "Well, here he'll hear music before he takes a step." Gabriel approached, a folder in hand filled with notes and color-coded Post-its. "You know what I've been reading?" he asked. Naomi glanced. "A research study on neuroplasticity and motor repatterning in early childhood." "You really read all that?" "I used to run one of the world's largest data firms," Gabriel said. "But I never understood how a child's brain processes the feeling of safety." Naomi nodded, watching him closely. "So, is this part of your public redemption arc?" Gabriel chuckled softly, for the first time, genuinely. "No, this is the first time I'm learning how to be present, without trying to take over." She nodded, then pointed to a photo hanging at the center of the yard. Eli, guiding another child forward, smiled widely. "This boy," she said, "doesn't need someone to hold his hand anymore." "But he still needs a father who shows up," Gabriel replied. "That's the difference I didn't understand." On opening day, there were no grand banners, no political speeches, just music. In a wide auditorium, children with mobility aids formed a circle. In the center, Eli, now wearing only a light brace, led a short routine with 3 other kids. He didn't spin fast, he didn't jump high, but every movement had rhythm, purpose, and, more than anything, confidence that no doctor had ever predicted. Gabriel stood in the back. He didn't step onto the stage. He just watched, quietly. Naomi walked up beside him. "Not going to give a welcome speech?" "No," Gabriel said, "because today isn't about me." A reporter from the Chronicle approached. "Mr. Whitmore, how does it feel to see your son perform like this?" Gabriel looked at Eli, now guiding a young girl to find her balance, smiling as he did. "Proud," he answered, "not because he overcame something, but because he's created something for someone else." Another question followed. "What's the biggest lesson you've learned from this journey?" Gabriel Whitmore, once a name synonymous with power and control, didn't pause to think. "That leadership," he said, "it isn't about showing others the way. It's having the courage to follow when someone else shows you a better one." 1 year later, Rise and Rhythm had expanded to 3 more cities. Naomi received a national award for innovation in pediatric rehabilitation. Her model was being adopted in public hospitals and learning centers across the country. Eli, now only using a cane on tired days, was enrolled in a mainstream public school. He had become the youngest spokesperson for the Move to Your Own Rhythm movement. And Gabriel learned the hardest lesson of his life: that not everything worth building can be measured, analyzed, or funded. Some things only emerge when you're willing to step back. Because sometimes true strength isn't about leading. It's about recognizing when it's time to let someone else step forward. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. Some stories don't need to shout to reach the heart. Sometimes it just takes a glance, a dance, or a first step to remind us that change doesn't always begin with the powerful. Sometimes it begins with those brave enough to listen and patient enough to walk slowly beside someone else. If this story touched you in any way, please share it, because somewhere out there, someone might be waiting for just a flicker of light to keep going. Thank you for staying until the final moment. And thank you for believing that kindness still matters.